There's so much to study on the gifts of the Spirit, and it seems like we could go on endlessly taking everything that Jesus ever did and, let's say, picking apart those places where he exercised the gifts. And while we're talking about the raising of the dead, because this is also the place where Jesus exercises the power gifts of the Spirit, the gift of faith and the gift of performing of miracles. Many times not only does he manifest those gifts, but he goes into the word of knowledge and the word of wisdom at the same time. We're going to see, of course, as we've already studied in the sessions prior to this, that many times when a miracle is performed, you'll have 4, 5, or 6 gifts exercised at one time. And I want you to turn in your scriptures now to Luke chapter 7 and reading verse 19. No, I think maybe we better start at verse 11. Luke chapter 7. I gave you a misquote there. Verse 11. Luke 7:11. Came to pass the day after that he went into a city called Nain, and many of his disciples went with him, and much people. Now here we have again a large procession, a funeral procession, as we see here right following this. When he came nigh to the gate of the city, behold, there was a dead man carried out. So we not only have a funeral procession, but we have a large crowd following Jesus out of the city of Nain. So we've got 2 big crowds of people coming together converging in one spot. Jesus knows how to draw people together, you know. And he knows how to do it in a very, very spectacular way. So he comes to this place, and he sees, of course, this funeral procession being carried on. And we find a dead man has been carried out, and he is being carried in sort of a coffin, or call it a bier if you want, which is mentions here in the scriptures. And this man was the only son of his mother, and of course the mother was a widow. And there were many people in this funeral procession. There are some funerals, of course, that we see that are very large, large funerals. And apparently this woman was very well known, because there was many people in that procession at that time. And when the Lord saw the woman, it said he had compassion on her. Do you know, I wish that you would take that word and underline it, compassion. Compassion. You know, there is a big difference between the word sympathy and compassion. Sympathy, what does sympathy mean? Well, sympathy means to have sort of a like feeling towards somebody. That is, when a person dies, you sympathize. You feel sorry for them, right? You would like to be able to do something, but really a person almost has to share that grief all by themselves. You can't really share grief sometimes with a person. It's something that they carry by themselves, but you sympathize and you feel with them. We send people sympathy cards. Now, there's another word called compassion. And what is the difference then between the word sympathy and compassion? Well, compassion also has meaning of sympathy. You feel for the person, but so much so that now you're going to act on it. You have to do something about it. Compassion is compelled by love. So because he saw this woman now and sympathized with her in her state, and then he loved her with such a great love, he was now moved to do something about it. And it says here that he went over to the woman and he said, "Don't cry, honey. Don't cry." Now here is a woman who has only one son, and her husband is dead, and there's no one left in her family, and she's weeping. She's at her own son's funeral. It's very difficult to tell somebody not to cry at a funeral of a loved one. It seems to be a natural thing to cry. But he comes and he speaks a word of comfort to her. "Don't cry, honey." And just 2 words. "Weep not." That's all he said. Two words. And then it says he came and touched the coffin. And they that bore him stood still, and he said, "Young man, I say unto thee, arise." Let's look at something else here. Anybody in their right mind, and I've come to the conclusion that we have found out that Jesus wasn't always, to our way of thinking, in his right mind. He did things completely contrary in many occasions to what others thought that he should do. And he came and he put his hand on the coffin, the bier, the thing that carried this man, and it says that the procession stopped. Now, anybody who is understanding of sympathizing with the person, you've got a funeral procession going down the road in a hearse, right? And you've got all of the cars, and they're going practically bumper to bumper. Their lights are all on, and they're going to the graveyard, and they're taking that dead body to bury it. Who in their right mind is going to come up into an intersection and squeeze their way in through that stream of cars and be rude? You know, and stop a funeral procession. The funeral procession would have to stop, right? For it? Well, Jesus did exactly that. It says he came up, put his hand on the coffin, and the funeral procession stopped. At this point now, every eye would be on him. Normally speaking, I would say this, that the people would react this way. My goodness, what is this man trying to do anyway? Look at that. Isn't that awful? He's stopping the funeral. Ah, that's in poor taste, isn't it? Wouldn't we react this way? Now, there was something about this man that denoted authority. He not only spoke the words, and you know, they said of him, look, he doesn't talk like the scribes and the Pharisees. He speaks with authority. There's something about this character. When Jesus moved, he always moved with great dignity. As we've said in the past, you know, Jesus was never schizophrenic. He was never psychopathic. He never went around as though he was in a dream or in a trance. But when he moved with authority. And he stopped the coffin procession going down the street. And then he said, now again, he directed himself to the problem, right? He said, young man, I say unto thee, arise. Isn't it amazing that wherever Jesus went, there was life? He never went to one funeral but when he raised the dead. Whew! Isn't that neat? Every funeral he ever went to, he raised the dead. Because Jesus was life. And we gave you that portion of Scripture in one of the other seminars. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. And that's when he spoke, that which was dead came alive. The law that said that however was that man died by sickness, that now there is another law that exists that says that that man is now going to come to life. And as we've already studied the gift of the discerning of spirits, we will see as well that all Jesus is doing is calling the spirit back to the body. And when you understand what spirit is, it won't be such a scary thing to quote, raise the dead. I realize it isn't done just every day. But that's using the word of wisdom as to when to do it. Now he speaks to the situation, to the problem, and he says, young man, I say unto thee, arise. To the young man. He's not talking to the people carrying the coffin. He's not talking to anybody else in the procession. He's not even talking to God. He is talking to the young man. And he says, arise. And he that was dead. Now everybody knew that this boy was dead. Everybody knew this. And he said, well, the young man began to speak, or the man began to speak, and he delivered him then to his mother. And there came a fear on all, and they glorified God. Now, it's not a fear, it's a reverent fear. They glorified God, saying that a great prophet is risen up amongst us, and that God hath visited. And this rumor of him went throughout all Judea and throughout all the region around about. And the disciples of John showed him all these things. Well, this rumor of him, I mean, it's not every day that someone raises the dead, right? Here is something they had never seen, never witnessed before. Why, my goodness, this is spectacular. It is. Again, let me say, you know, if you want things to, your ministry to start building up reasonably quickly, just begin to exercise the power gifts of the Spirit, the gift of faith and the gift of performing of miracles. We're going to go into the gift of healing later. And as you do, you're going to see some wonderful things taking place. It's the spoken word. I can imagine, and you can very well imagine here, that Jesus, after he raised the dead, that these people were greatly astonished. Now I want to ask you another question here. Why did Jesus let everybody remain there at the raising of this man off this bier? Why did he leave everybody there, the two different ones, the ones that came with him from Nain and the ones that were following the funeral procession? Why did he leave them all there? And yet when he raised Jairus' daughter from the dead, he had them all go out of the room and he didn't minister in front of them at all. Now that's where we say that the gift of the word of wisdom comes in. With this, what to do about the situation once you know the facts. And when he did this, he knew then that that was the right time to do that. In one case, he leaves all these people there. In another case, he tells them all to go out. Now we're going to take a peek at something else, and this is Matthew chapter 17. Another miracle. Matthew chapter 17. And this is a story of a different type of a miracle with Peter. And we're looking at verse 24. And when they were come to Capernaum, they that received tribute money came to Peter and said, Doth not your master pay tribute? And he said, Yes. And when he was come into the house, Jesus prevented him, saying, What do you think, Simon? Of whom do the kings of earth take custom or tribute? Of their own children or of strangers? And Peter said to him, Well, of strangers. And he said unto him, Then are the children free. Notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, go to the sea and cast an hook and take up the fish that first comes up. And when you have opened his mouth, you will find a piece of money. Take it and give unto them for me and thee. We're finding here that Jesus is exercising several gifts of the Spirit. First of all, he saw when Peter came into the room, he received a word of knowledge. You see, Jesus wasn't even around when Peter had the discussion with these men, right? He wasn't even around. But when he came in, he knew what Peter had been thinking. Now, in discussing the word of knowledge, we know in many places Jesus, quote, knew their thoughts, or knew they were desirous to ask questions, and so on. And when we see this portion of Scripture here, we know that he knew what discussion had gone on with Peter. And so he asked him this, and Peter, of course, told him the answer. Then he says, Now you go down. He exercises another word of knowledge by saying that you will find a piece of money, and you will find it in the fish's mouth. Now here's something as well. Fish don't generally swallow money. Worms, yes, but money, no. And there was a word of knowledge. Not only that, but it was the right amount of money to pay the right amount of tax. Isn't that amazing? Now, I don't think Jesus went around doing this all the time to pay his taxes. I often think it would be kind of nice to have an idea like this to pay my taxes, but it was for a special reason, again, to build up Peter's faith in these beautiful things. I find that Jesus always performed miracles in front of people who were too shrewd to be deceived in anything else. They knew their trade. They knew what it was in their own field of work. You note, please, that Jesus performed a miracle in front of the fishermen know that you don't catch fish in the daytime hours, at least not these fellows on the Sea of Galilee. They went out at night and caught their fish, right? They trolled at night. Now, when they come in the morning, they know that they're not going to catch it because the fish can see the net. They're going to be scared away when the net's thrown in. So in front of the fishermen, he performed a miracle. And he said, Look, Peter, cast your take your boat out into the waters and let down your net on the other side, and you will bring in a draft of fish. Woo-wee! And that's exactly what they did. Now, these fishermen knew he performed a miracle in front of professionals in their field. They knew how to fish. Jesus also performed miracles in front of doctors. Again, doctors who would be knowledgeable in the fact that what had taken place in people's bodies when Jesus healed them was a miracle. We're witnessing God doing so many miracles today, right? So many miracles. And as he does miracles, we see evidences of doctors saying, look, I don't understand it. I had this patient, you know, and they were in a terrible shape. They had an awful burn on their body, and the burn healed so fast. Others who have damaged bodies because of car accidents, and people who have had cancer, and well, you can name any anatomy of the body. And when they go to get re-examined again, they say, look, you're not even supposed to be alive. I don't know what's happened, but it's obviously got to be a miracle. Doctors who understand the principle of faith and the things of Jesus know that it is the power of God that heals. Now also, Jesus performed healings in front of pig ranchers. And those who understand this particular thing know that pigs will not run down a steep embankment and run into deep water. When the legion was cast out and they went into the pigs, into the swine, remember? Pigs won't go into deep water. They'll go into mud. Mud, yes, but not deep water. As I understand it, if pigs get into deep water, they can't swim. They get their claws or their hoofs up here and break open the veins, apparently, in their neck, and they really can't swim, and they would die, kill themselves in the water. So pigs don't jump into deep water. So he performed that type of a miracle in front of them. Then, of course, he performed the miracle in front of the customs officers with the coin in the fish's mouth. And everywhere you go, you will see that Jesus performed miracles in front of people who were professionals in their field. When I was, again, working in Trinidad, and there was a man who came to me for ministry. I did not know at this point that he was a Catholic priest. Over there, they dress just like other people with ordinary clothes, and they generally wear their cross around their neck, but apparently it was underneath his shirt, so I didn't even see it. Now, he had been sitting in some of my meetings, and he had been saying, you know, either this woman has got to be the biggest hoax that there is in the countryside, or she really is a woman of God. And he was sitting there really observing everything. He wanted to know, is it possible that a person can reveal the needs of another person, you know? Down over there, someone is sick with this, and over here, someone's got this, and so on. And reveal these needs. And he thought, I don't know. I wonder if maybe that she hasn't planted these people there. So he thought, I'm going to find out. And I was sitting eating my dinner at the dinner table, and he came over, and he just asked me if I would pray with him. He put his hand down on the table, and I just put my fingers, just touched my fingers over on his hand, and I began to minister to him. And I named about 3 or 4 things wrong with his body. And then I asked Jesus to touch and to heal him. You know, he looked up at me and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, you know, I'm convinced that you are indeed a woman of God. Because he said, only my doctor knew of those 3 things that were wrong with me. Only my doctor. And he said it would be humanly impossible for you to know anything about that. This man is a beautiful person there in the Caribbean. And in fact, he does a lot of personal counseling. He stayed and took the seminar and finished the seminar and the teaching it. And you know, he wept all the way through it. He was so touched by the things that he was learning. And this man told me he had come back to Canada for a particular holiday. And he came back and he told me, he says, Mary, he says, where it used to take me an hour to counsel people and to get to the bottom of the problems and to minister to them and to try to help them. He said, now it only takes me 10 minutes. He says, I get them out of my office right away. Oh, bless God. As we learn the gifts of the Spirit and the power gifts of the Spirit, we can minister to people so much more efficiently. God bless you. We're going to see you next time. Come back, won't you?